before we're ready to take it to the state board in May. So Jim, do you want to talk a little bit, as you're kind of taking that charge of the stakeholders, do you want to talk a little bit about that process and where we're at with that?
Certainly, Jared. Thank you very much. But before I begin that, first, let me say that to the subcommittees, you guys are doing a splendid job. Excellent. Thanks for the leadership and for your hard work. And I know that, you know, what Jared just outlined in terms of timeline, we'd like to jump right in there and just get this thing done. You know, it's a, we don't want to drag this process out. And I know there's a real feeling that we could probably put a product together right now. But I think it's important that we continue to discuss and begin to see, as some of the subcommittee chairs have said, that there's an alignment that's happening as we move forward to bring these different challenges to a head. But today, Jared mentioned the fact that we're going to be focusing on stakeholders. And that's a pretty big part of this. We can have the best product in the world, but if the product isn't accepted by those who didn't participate for one reason or another, then our work will be in vain. You know, this is really important. And I don't know, I'm just going to deviate just for a moment. And I'm looking at Ed Raines. Okay, Ed, you've been really big part of this. I'm picking on you because you're in a high school that's in Topeka. You're at the center of this whole thing, and, you know, of the universe in Kansas, you know, so to speak. And Ed, anybody in your social group ever talk to you, or, and I'm saying outside of school, could be a business person, could be your own social networking that you have. Anybody ever talk to you about graduation?
Not generally. I have a next door neighbor that has an interest in education, and so we talk things like dress code from time to time.
Oh God, get right to it.
But generally, no,
You know,
to answer your question.
Yeah, well, and others of you might have similar, you know, experiences, because just like what Ed said about dress code, it's usually when something pops up and looks strange or different that they will take a look at it. My experience, you know, and I've been in the business since 1967. So in my experience, not many people are really interested in graduation until either affects them or until they see some notoriety, something comes up, you know, and I've had conversations over the years that, you know, graduation is too easy. You know, you guys get everybody out, or it's not tough enough. You know, you're not challenging kids, you know, and then I tell them, you know, what was the graduation rate in 1967? You know, back in the days when schools were tough, you know, and we held kids to higher standards, and learning was a real important time. That's not how I remember the 60s, but some people do. And, you know, you look back at that time, and the graduation rate was mostly in the mid 50s. And we only had like 16, maybe 18 credits. You know, you didn't have to take more than one credit of math. You know, sure, it was tougher in those days. We had higher standards. You know, the fact that we have 21 credits today and multiple classes that you have to take, and, you know, that many districts, the 100% of our districts have more credits to be earned at this time than at any time in history. And our graduation rate today is the highest it's ever been. I believe it's somewhere around 85, 86%. I don't have it right there. I'm looking at Jay Scott. Jay, what's our graduation rate? Exactly.
Last time I checked, it was 88.3. 88.3.
I think that's correct. Yes, and that was last year, wasn't it? We finally got those numbers out. They typically come out in September. Yeah, so 88.3, you know, that's the highest it's ever been in Kansas. You know, think about that. You know, and we have the highest number of credits that have to be earned. You know, so when did graduation become a big deal? Because like I said, in the 60s, it wasn't a big deal. It was like, almost in the 60s, it was like, if you don't want to graduate, tough. You just get out of school. Kids dropped out. You come to school and you look at the seat next to you, and you know, there'd be Randy Watson's seat, and he's gone. A couple of days, he's still gone. Hey, Randy ever coming back? What happened to Randy? I don't know. He's out. He's gone. Joined the military. You know, it was a whole different time. Today, we have an expectation that students will graduate and that they'll go on to a happy and productive future. That wasn't the case in the 70s and 80s. In fact, I didn't hear anything about in my career. I didn't hear anything about graduation rate being a standard of excellence until NCLB, No Child Left Behind. Well, maybe a little bit, because maybe in the mid 88, 89, we started to use data for the first time. And I would tell you this, accreditation was a lot easier in 1980s than it is today, because all you had to do is tell them all about the good stuff, forget about the bad stuff, have somebody who could write really well, put a committee together, and you got accredited. You know, make you kind of want those days again, because then all of a sudden the nation went to NCLB, and all of a sudden graduation numbers became something that was important. And I, as a principal in the early 90s, for the first time, talked to an assistant superintendent about my graduation rate. You know, so there's a misunderstanding about graduation rates and how they're achieved. And as we've heard from speakers through our time here, graduation is different in different states in terms of what they have to achieve to reach that standard of graduation. Now, we know that there's multiple ways to get multiple diplomas, and we're not going to go into that now, but we will later. But my point is, graduation is that we're at the highest rate of graduation that we've ever had in the state of Kansas, with the highest standards to achieve graduation. You know, and to high school principals across the state, I give them a great deal of credit for coming up with innovative and unique ways to help students, you know, reach that goal of graduation. Because we know today, of course, that graduation from high school, it's not the highest that you should ever get. We, as a state board, and wish that all students would get that second certificate following. Could be from any number of sources, but we know that there's more to it than just high school. Well, I come back to my dear friends and neighbors and buddies, you know, in my social group. And when I found out that I was, you know, going to chair or even be on this task force, you know, I started to get a little bit of, questions, probing. I don't want to be nasty and say they were just a pain in the butt, but they became a pain in the butt. We need to just kick those kids out. You know, that was one theme. You know, if they don't want to go to school, the heck with them. Let them suffer for the rest of their life. Well, there's a nice thought. And we have legislators, actually, just a couple of months ago that I was sitting with at a meeting that basically said the same thing. High standards. We need to have high standards and get them out. If they don't like it, tough. They can basically suffer for it. Now, that's an interesting thought. Then I had others that say, it's just a waste of time. You're just going to graduate kids and they're just going to go out. It doesn't make any difference. You know, we don't have any high standards today, as I talked about before. But then I had others that were very interested, and these were people who, in many ways, you know, were people who worked with, who were engaged with the workforce and who hired people. And they were much more interested in the quality of the graduates. And they were a little concerned about what was going on, but then, you know, if you work for a law firm, you're going to be talking to lawyers. You're not going to be talking to kids that didn't graduate. For those that were hiring, you know, minimum wage folks, they were disappointed in many times in the quality of the students that they were hiring for minimum wage jobs. And I said, you're advertising to minimum wage people. You know, you're not looking at the top. People aren't coming to you who graduated from college. You know, people aren't coming to you who graduated from high school typically. And they had to look at it a little differently. But we are looking at things differently today because it's important that the task force present the state of Kansas a positive and thoughtful manner in the coming weeks and months to the stakeholders, who include, as Jared said, organizations, individuals, associations, college professors, those people who are hiring. And for the first time, we're going to introduce the work of the task force, because many people don't know that we're here. And many people are terribly unaware of what the graduation requirements are. They have no idea that we have excellent standards. We have teachers and administrators and school boards that care deeply about getting students across the stage with a diploma. And that wasn't true in 1967. And it has to be. We have to do that. But when we present this information, there's going to be a little bit more information, and we have to get it out, so we're going to get it out. But there's going to be a lot of discussion about graduation, which it should be. I think the higher the level of discussion across our state for graduation is going to be to the benefit of our schools and our students. But there's probably going to be a lot of discourse. There are those out there that, as much as they want higher standards, they still want kids to, they don't believe we have, and they won't believe. So this conversation that we're going to have with stakeholders, as we identify them over the next month or so, and we introduce ourselves to them, is going to be vital to the success of our task force. What you produce to be taken out has to change the attitudes and the awareness and the understanding of what a high school graduate is to the general public. And as I said, it's too bad that they don't have those conversations, Ed, with you on a regular basis. I'd like to see that conversation happen more often, rather than being critical, but being inquisitive and supportive. So as we begin our efforts in working with stakeholders, I encourage you to get a hold of Jared or I, and let us know of different groups and organizations that you would be interested, that you should think we should be interested in contacting. It's going to be an array of people. And then each one of you is going to be an ambassador for this task force in your own sphere of influence, in your own communities. And we're counting on you to do that. We will be providing you with information, with fact sheets and talking points that will help you understand or help you present, so folks in your communities and your sphere of influence understand better what the task force is about, what the challenges are, and how we're moving to increase the standards, but increase the success for all students as well. So as we begin this process, again, I come back, please help Jared and I help us put together the list of those that are going to be important that we talk to get our message out about the work of the task force. So thank you for what you do. You've done a marvelous job. It's really amazing the time that we've worked of what the product is and where we are right now. I'm looking forward to May and bringing it to the state board as the first step of publicly taking it out into the public. And the state board is eager to see this. So thank you. I'm looking forward to your work. And Jared, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, Jim, thank you. I'm going to guess you used to be a history teacher. That's just going to be my guess.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate that. I think that's good things to remember. And I just want to remind, before we go into our subcommittees here in just a minute, I just want to remind, the state board put together their definition. This is from January of 2016, and the definition of a successful high school graduate from Kansas has the academic preparation, the cognitive preparation, the technical skills, employability skills, and civic engagement to be successful in post-secondary education, in the attainment of an industry recognized certification, or in the workforce without the need of remediation. So that's just a quick reminder as we move forward and we go and we're getting closer to those recommendations from those subcommittees. And I will again echo what Jim said. Those subcommittees, you guys have done an amazing job, and I think we're really close to some some good things moving forward. So yeah, Jim's doing a great job with the stakeholder stuff, and we're going to try to give, the only thing I'll add, Jim, is we're going to try to give stakeholders every opportunity to give feedback, whether that be in person, whether that be electronically, whether that be a phone call. We don't want to give anyone an excuse that we didn't give them an opportunity to give feedback, because all of that feedback, positive or negative, is valuable and good for us to be able to look at. So Peggy, I believe we're ready if you are.
Yes, ready for me to send everybody to the rooms?
I think we are. We will have about an hour in our subcommittees today, and then we'll come back and get some reports. So we will see you guys in a little bit. Peggy, I think we're all back, or are we?
Looks like it, 31.
Okay. Well, Jim, I have one question for you, and then I have a question for the subcommittee leaders. Would there be any value in taking an additional 10 minutes in their subcommittee today? Christy, Ed, Kelly?
I think it's up to them.
I think we could use another 10 minutes. We were cut short right there at the very end, but I think our group could certainly use another 10 minutes.
Okay. Christy, Ed?
Yeah,
I-
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I apologize. I wasn't watching the time very well, and we were in the middle of something, and then it went away.
Okay, so Peggy, if you're okay, I think we'll take another 10 minutes in our subcommittees and then we'll come back.
10. Okay,
Yep.
we'll shuffle again.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. I know that in our subcommittee that 10 minutes was pretty valuable into get a little bit more discussion. So let's take a few minutes here and subcommittee chairs, if you guys want to share a little bit about where you're at, and then Jim, we'll have you kind of close us out here as we finish up this meeting. So Christy, do you want to start with your subcommittee?
I will do my best. I will reiterate what I probably said before. It's so difficult to try to summarize 1 hour's worth of amazing ideas, and we kind of go off on different tangents and we come back together. So I have an amazing group where we really discussed a lot of great things today. We had originally started with just a draft that had been thrown together about possibly grouping requirements to give a lot more flexibility. We've mentioned that the last couple of times, that we really believe the piece that is important for us when we are looking at graduation credit requirements is that our students today need a lot more flexibility. That's the big change. For too many years, we've just put them in this path where they are expected to have so much math and so much science. And what we would like to do, or we're starting to consider today, once again, no plan is ready to present by any means, but we started talking about possibly pulling back a requirement for the core contents, like taking a year off science, a year off math, etc., or English. And before anybody gets too in an uproar, that doesn't mean that the students wouldn't continue to take them, because they might. It just depends on their individual path and their future. So we're just looking at trying to reduce what has typically been those core requirements for graduation, to allow more. Right now we're saying electives, but maybe it needs to be a different word, just more options for them to take courses that are particularly beneficial to them. So maybe they take 4 years of math and 4 years of science still, because that's what meets their needs. And then in relation to that, as we're looking at requirements of electives, we were looking at the things that the state has identified, that academic, technical, cognitive, employability, and civic engagement. And we're talking about possibly making that a group as well, so that students are required to address those specific skills, because we are seeing that those are things that are needed for all of them to be successful in their futures.
Awesome. Well, I think that was a pretty good summary of the hour. So don't be hard on yourself. That was good. Ed, do you want to talk a little bit about your subcommittee?
Absolutely. So when we met last time, we really took a dive into the ROSE capacities and looked at the competencies that were articulated in the Navigating Change document, because we wanted to make sure that we were being intentional about making sure that the capacities were a part of our work. And I think as we got into that, we quickly realized that we needed to really drill down more onto what the deliverables were going to be. What is it that was expected of our subcommittee? And so I reached out to KSDE and to Jared, talked a little bit, and we basically came up with 4 deliverables. The first one was going to be just a general statement of support for competency-based education. I think KASB has developed something along those lines already. So that ought to come together fairly quickly. The second thing was to develop recommendations for building support for CBE approaches across different constituencies and audiences. So obviously the first step to that was having a conversation about who those constituencies and audiences are. The second thing that will be a deliverable for us was specific recommendations for overcoming barriers or obstacles for such approaches. The legal regulatory barriers that are in place, like the stipulation for 1,116 hours, et cetera. And then finally, addressing specifically and developing strategies that we can use with school people in particular, boards of educations, administrators, teachers, and what their concerns are, and what their barriers might be, and how we can address those. So to do all of that, we basically divided up into 3 different work groups. I had 3 different Google Meets. The Google Meets worked to varying extents. We finally got most of the people in, and it worked pretty well. But I think we have a good start on identifying what some of those barriers might be related to each one of those three things. And next steps for us will be to more deeply refine what those barriers are, and then to start developing strategies to address them based on a lot of the research that Dr. Meckel provided our group over the last week. So that's kind of what we did today.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelly, subcommittee number 3.
Sure. We had a lot of great discussion today. I'd like to thank Paulie Vader, who is the Real World Learning Coordinator and CTE Coordinator from Piper. You did a great job of explaining all the great things that you guys are doing there. I think a lot of us are jealous of some of the things that you're able to do. But we, along with that, when we're looking at the value added or market value assets for possible requirement for graduation, we really centered around the flexibility and being able to work with our various stakeholders in making these things possible. So, so whatever we come up with, and again, we had a lot more questions, but it really focused, kind of drilled back down to the flexibility of making sure that whatever we do recommend is that it's possible for students to meet the requirements so that they are prepared for the future and will be a successful graduate.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kelly, Christy, Ed. I appreciate all the work that you guys have done and the work that everybody else has done. I will say, and then I'll turn it over to Jim here, that this is exciting. It's exciting to see the progress that this group has made, and that we're really going to do some really neat things for our students while keeping that, you hear from all three of you, and the group may hear that word, that flexibility word, and being able to have that flexibility, and also the individual for each individual student is obviously a focus, and I think that's important. So Jim, if you want to close us out here, I know our next meeting is October 28th. So I'll turn it over to you, Jim, to finish us off here. And you're on mute, Jim.
Thank you, Jared. It's that technology skills. Seeing that line across the microphone. Jared, I want to jump on with you. They're great conversations, and just listening to the summaries by each of the subcommittee chairs, the level of conversations is a very, very high level. We're going in the right direction. So thank you very much. October 28th is our next meeting, and I look forward to that, because actually I believe we only have one meeting in December, on November 18th, and then 2 in December, but January 20th is our report. Listening to the response, listening to the summaries, and talking to the chairs, and listening in on different conversations, it's apparent that we're moving in the right direction, and that our conversations are starting to become are moving towards us working together. The subcommittees are great for right now, but our next step is to bring it all together. And I think we're heading in that right direction. So again, Jared, and to everyone, we'll be back again on October 28th. And thank you very much. What a great task force this is turning out to be. Thank you very much. So all have a good day and be safe.